We're back here on our program, in the final segment of our program, and we are speaking with Emerson Luther Smith.
Luther Emerson.
Luther Emerson. All right, the other way around. Okay, Luther E. Smith. And Mr. Smith, you know, I have a friend who is on vacation. He's on pre-retirement leave, he said, but he has vacation. He told me in October that he is on vacation until September of 2019. That doesn't make sense to me.
No, well, clearly that's an abuse of the system, and it's an egregious abuse. Everyone is entitled to varying periods of leave. I think 4 weeks in one category, right, then 5 weeks in another category. No one should be allowed to go through a calendar year or a financial year without taking at least some leave.
Yeah, but how can you accumulate that amount of vacation?
Well, because they have not taken any, because probably the argument is that he can't go on leave now, he's indispensable. But that's the problem with the public service. A lot of people have assumed indispensability. I can't leave my position because I have to be here. And maybe they have to because there's no one next to him or under him or her who can carry out that function. So persons go on and on. But if you have 5 weeks leave, which is normally 4 weeks leave, which is the normal, is the norm, persons, it should be regulated that you should begin to take it in blocks of 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks at a time. You should not just let it accumulate because there is a financial cost to that. And here it is. While they're getting 60 weeks leave, or in some cases more than that, the position that they held cannot substantively be filled because the post is not yet vacant.
But the other factor too, Luther, is that for you to have an accumulative month leave, you need permission from the Department of Public Personnel. You have to have a letter.
Yes.
Right? And that tells me, Randall, that the system is broken down for that to happen, right? Because if you can't produce a letter, you can't get paid.
Yeah, you can't be paid. You have to have that letter.
Well, you can't say you can't be paid, Mr. Enius, because the report stated that there were people who left the public service who are still on the payroll.
Well, of course, because they are on this extended leave.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're on this extended leave. And I'm saying that even for the most senior person in the public service, there is absolutely no reason why come January, you shouldn't take a month's leave. Not a month, a week's leave. Come July, you take another week's leave. Come November, you take. So your cumulative leave over the year would have been 3 weeks and you only have 1 week remaining. That's what happens in banks and in the private sector. They don't take the full 3 or 4 weeks leave that they have, 21 days, all at one time. They take it in small segments. I found this out when I was out in the Pacific. I had a total of no more than 21 days leave, which is really 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And the way I dealt with it is in the course of a year, I took 5 days, and then when you add holidays into it, it was sufficient time for me to fly across from the Pacific to the Bahamas and spend a week and a half. And then the next segment, that's how you do it. You manage your leave so that at the end of the day, that 21 days is exhausted. And then you add to that things like public holidays and other casual days, and, casual leave, etc. In addition to the 4 or 5 weeks, you have 10 days casual leave. And the casual leave can only take in 2 days at a time.
All of these things, Mr. Smith, they impact the quality of governance in the country. And we've seen in recent times many unions are very unhappy. The public service union, the teachers union, and the doctors,
yes, the doctors and the nurses.
The nurses.
Yes.
Because it appears that we are not following proper procedures. There's no standard of procedure for proper governance of the Bahamas.
Well, I think this is the point Mr. Enius made, in that most people don't understand the system within which they are working. That's the first issue. The second issue, though, is that there is not this stringent demand from the senior managers and others to insist on certain things.
Well, some of them don't know.
Well, that is true too, but there should be somebody who knows something. The bulk of the public service is performed, as I said, by that infantry, the foot soldiers. In the case of the health system, it's the nurse, the technologists, the technicians, the doctors. Those are the foot soldiers.
Yeah, but how can you not be reviewed? You have a public servant whose employment has not been reviewed for many, many years.
That's the slackness of the department.
Well,
you have to have what is called annual confidential reports.
Annual confidential report should be done. They've changed the format for that, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is, I think the bureaucracy has gotten too large. It's ungovernable. And one of the suggestions about public sector reform, as I said earlier, shouldn't just be window dressing. You have to be serious about it. The public service is large because we have made it large. 50% of the people on the public service roll, or certainly I would say about 40%, can easily be siphoned off into local government entities. If you were to add the entire public service roll of the United Kingdom, well, that's too drastic. But let's go to a small country like New Zealand, which I've visited. If you had to take the entire public service roll of New Zealand, it will probably be large as well for a country of about 3 to 4 million people. But the people who perform certain functions, daily functions, are not within the public service per se. They are in local government. They work for the shires. They work for the counties. They work for the city. They work for other entities. And so the first thing of reform, and again I get back to Mr. Eniu's point, is that it's going to continue to get bigger because some people who were hired in 1992 as a janitress or a janitor or as a yardman or as a painter and very casual labor at the time are now reaching the point where they're saying, I now need to retire, but I don't have a letter of retirement.
Right.
And no government could be that insensitive that it doesn't regularize these people. So they come onto the roll and they have to be treated as an individual. But I want to make this final point before we sign off. I think the way for us to go about this now is we need to start with recruitment. We need to recruit specifically for some key positions in the public service. You don't recruit permanent secretaries. You don't recruit deputy permanent secretaries. You don't recruit a financial secretary. These are persons who have to come up through the system. And how do you do it? You start at the entry level. So we must go out and look for that sharp young lady or that sharp young man. Some of them are in the system, but we need more. We must then gradually phase them through a rigorous period of training, retraining, and training appropriate to every level of the public service.
That is all well and good, but the politicians come in, they win elections, and they say, you know, we won. This is the way I want it. And I say often that patronage is politics.
Yeah, but patronage not at the level at the expense of one of your key institutions.
Yes, but that is the way it has been.
Yeah.
And people follow what they have met in place.
Yeah, but there's certain positions that are
A patronage free, a patronage free, It should be on the basis of competition, it should be on the basis of ability, it should be on the basis of experience, and it should be on the basis of performance.
But the politician will say, you know, I want someone who is loyal to me or loyal to my government.
Well, and the politician should have what I would refer to as their own little private office. And this has happened in the United States.
You get a consultant.
Yeah, you bring people in, you have your private office. And in that private office, you could have any number of advisors, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, each minister, and I would strongly recommend it, should have, in addition to his public service people who they may not trust, they should have their own private office with a chef de cabinet, meaning their chief of staff, et cetera, et cetera.
But wouldn't that cause some more confusion?
It wouldn't cause any more confusion because there should be a clear line as to what the chef de cabinet deals with and a clear line as to what the director of the department or the permanent secretary deals with.
The permanent secretary is really the CEO. The permanent secretary runs the ministry.
Well, for example, ministers require speeches to be written. Ministers require their own personal correspondence to be acknowledged. Ministers require to have people to handle some of their public relation efforts. Ministers require people to do that kind of things. It's hard for you to go into a ministry like the Ministry of Education, for example, which has a public information unit, which incidentally I started when I was at the Ministry of Education back in when I went back as permanent secretary. And, you know, they need these things to be done. Well, here is your staff to deal with that. Now, when the results are declared on election night and the new minister is sworn in, you leave, but that staff leave with you. The system carries on. And I always liked the Yes Minister episodes, which the British aired many, many years ago. And there was always friction between the private office and the establishment. But the important thing was that each one knew his role and knew how to work within that role. Mm-hmm. But I think the need for reform is clear. The need for drastic reform is clear. I will go on record as saying I have some misgivings about the report. One being the fact that it was written by a single individual, and I don't know the extent of her consultation with the private sector, with social partners, with others. But the fact is, the report is the report. And so even though there may be some exaggerations, like a bloated civil service, et cetera, these are code phrases. Even though there may be these types of exaggeration, the report needs to be seriously considered, seriously analyzed, and out of it, you come with a series of policy recommendations.
There's one aspect, I don't know if it was covered in the report, but it's a very, very serious aspect, and that is this non-contributory
Pension.
public sector.
Yes.
Public servants contribute nothing to the pension.
Yeah, pensions.
All right? And as this public service grows,
Yes.
and more people become permanent and pensionable, it's going to be a big cost to the government.
Yes. Well, that is a part of the reform that we're talking about.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to
And
be here.
I always say that we need you on our program more often. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Mr. Enos?
Thank you.
Sir.
Nice
Thank
to see
you, Godfrey.
always.
Thank you for watching and listening to our program. Good evening.